Welcome to day 29. We're almost done through the program. We've been focusing on executive communication this week. And today is a real important day. We're going to be talking about written and verbal communication. Written and verbal communication happen in multiple places with a focus on executive communication. We're going to go through some tips that can really help to refine how you communicate, both in terms of how you speak and how you write. So I'm just waiting on our slides. Here we go. Sometimes the slides are a little bit slow, but we've got it. So some general principles in terms of communicating either verbally or through some written form of communication. You want to have this system of problem, solution, and context. So what is the gap? What is the thing that's wrong? What is the proposed solution? And what is the context in which this sits in? So I've given this example earlier. You can say something like, we generated $2 million. Sounds like a great accomplishment. But when you generate $2 million, when 50% of a workforce is laid off, and overall there's been a 50% reduction in the industry, there's been a recession, there's been digital disruption. That's the context in which the problem and the solution exist. Because the problem could have been increased sales to cover these three initiatives, but the context was all these other things. And being able to solve the problem with the solution within the context creates a whole different story and a whole different level of scope and impact. So include the context, problem, solution, and context, concept and example. And it's kind of similar to 10,000 feet, 10 feet. It's just this concept of when you share something that maybe isn't intuitively understandable or kind of sounds theoretical, giving an example makes it practical. Zooming in makes it practical. Or if you're talking about a large area of the business, again, $2 million in revenue at the 10,000 foot view, the 10-foot view could be that you enabled the team to move from 5 digital marketing campaigns in a month to deliver over 50. And that is the logistics, just diving in for a detail and coming back out. This is particularly helpful when you need to introduce something new and you need to explain it, but you don't have the time to give a description of the explanation and use the example to create anchors to create the definition of the example. Killing the comma or kill the comma. If you frequently find yourself writing sentences that in the middle stop with a comma and then say the thing, the important thing that you want to say, usually you're going to want to switch that around and start with the important thing to say. And then the comma is more about likely how you made that happen. So when you write something out, if you find yourself using a lot of those commas, how can you write it the other way around? And if you're not sure how to do that, you can look up resources on that, but there's a great tool called Grammarly that will look at your writing and you can set it for like professional writing, business writing, confident writing, and you will see it will frequently get rid of your commas and move the structure of your sentences and make your written communication more confident. Directness and brevity. I had one boss who would always say, make it pithy, make it pithy. And this is just about saying what you have to say that is most important and leaving it at that. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, like with headlines versus topics and relevance and connectivity. So if you look at a written communication or a verbal communication, how does the thing that you say next connect to the thing that you just said or you said earlier on in the conversation? And then this is crucial. Learn to use business language. If you don't have a finance background or an accounting background, I strongly recommend that You do some research online, you take a course or something just to develop the language. This is where I often see, like, every once in a while, every year or every 2 years, there's always this conversation that comes up that says, is an MBA worth it? And I'm not going to argue if it's worth it or not. I can just tell you that one of the most important things, at least for me, for an MBA, was it gave me a common vocabulary to communicate with other leaders. So learn the language of business, because it'll also give you the right shortcuts, the right anchors that you can use in your communication. And you'll see some of that in just a moment. So here's some written structure. There's this concept of too long, didn't read. And that might not be culturally acceptable in your organization, but it's essentially a 1-line or 2-line thing that explains what the entire note is about to say. So if somebody didn't read it, they get it. You can also summarize things through bullets. So the most important information, make it scannable and quickly readable. And then headlines and not headings. Get into that in a moment. So giving the most important piece of information, not what this section is about. And then the section can give you the details that back up the headlines. And then ultimately in your written communications, what's the recommendation that you're making? What's the ask? Remember, it's not just about the update. Anybody can give an update, and anybody can make that update sound very thoughtful and very authoritative. But for real leadership, you're going to need to give a recommendation, or you're going to need to have an ask. And that ask could kind of be a combination of ask and recommendation. You're guiding somebody towards a certain place by asking the right question. Then I mentioned using tools like Grammarly. Check out Grammarly. It works across browsers and in applications. And I think also newer versions of Microsoft Word at the time of this recording offer some interesting grammar editors beyond what we've typically been seeing. But if you're not good at writing, look at a couple of executive writing articles, modules online to go into this deeper, and download Grammarly. Put it right into your browser. It could really be a game changer for you, and learn from what it teaches you. So let's go into some examples. Too long, didn't read. This incorporates some business language. I'm using a lot of shortcuts here, plus 37%. So something increased by 37%. Wow, that's not wow, that's week over week. So what happened from last week to this week? And then what's in parentheses, that is the absolute value. So that 37% increase represents a $5 million increase. And then it starts to give some more details from custom solutions driven by 67 repeat clients and 12 percentage point week over week improvement. And then here's a recommendation. The team recommends reallocating $2 million of the marketing budget, 10%, again, giving a proportion of the $2 million to generate $10 million in demand for custom solutions from existing clients. So an example of the comma would have been something like custom solutions driven by 67 repeat clients and 12 percentage points week over week, comma, was resulted in a 37% week over week increase. Like the real piece of information was the big number, 37% increase for $5 million. Sometimes we focus on putting the wrong thing first and then use the comma, and the thing after the comma is the thing we should have talked about first. So be on the lookout for that. And then you see the representation of the business shortcuts and language here that any executive will and can use in order to articulate a lot of things very quickly. It's kind of a form of speed reading, shortcuts, whatever you want to call it. And this first sentence focuses on the top line, and the next sentence in this too long didn't read is the ask or the recommendation, and it's grounded in data. So if you're an executive, you're communicating to another executive or a more senior executive within like 5 seconds. They know what this is about and what you want, what you need, or what you're recommending. A bullet summary. So this articulates similar information in a scannable way. This could be at the beginning of a document. It could be under a too long didn't read. The biggest pieces of information to know to help somebody to understand quickly. Again, more articulation of business language in here, but you see how everything is direct. It is concise. It uses the business language to communicate some things. And some of this business language might be particular to your industry or what you do. So as an example, on the last bullet point here, 10% plus 10%. I probably could have even eliminated improvement there and just said plus 10% in implementation turnaround time, quarter over quarter. So turnaround time is how quickly something is done. It's relevant in this example, that focus on client services. Headlines, not headings. This is one of my big things. Okay, you know, you see something like 37% week over week plus $5 million from custom solutions driven by 67% repeat clients, or it's a 12% percentage point increase week over week. So yeah, that's the headline. The heading for that is service update. That's not the most important piece of information in that section of the writing. The most important piece is the headline. So don't say service update, say what the headline is. And then details per section. So using the example of the headline before, the reader, the executive, your peer can then go in, or the more senior person can then go in and understand the context behind that problem, the solution, the context behind that, to get more detail if they want it. Otherwise, they have the top line piece of information and perhaps the level that they're at, that's all they need. But you're giving the option for them to quickly understand the context behind that headline. Then finally, asking for the recommendation, right? What's the thing that you want them to walk away with from the communication to move the initiative forward? And this can be a headline too. So recommendation to ask 25% reallocation of engineering resources for the second half. And then the detail behind the ask. So here's a mix of headline and a detail focused on a recommendation and an ask, not just articulating information. On the verbal side, we also want to adopt the written guidelines. So using the business language, brevity, concepts, and examples, 10,000-foot view, 10-foot view, killing the comma, etc. And we want to introduce some new things. Talked about this earlier in the week. No filler, just pause. Just, like, so. It's amazing how these things also appear in written communication sometimes, especially so, like, just also appears. The point here is the fillers, all it really is our mouth's attempt at giving our brain time to catch up. That's all it is. And we do it because we think that if our listener, our audience, isn't hearing us saying anything, that they're going to think we're incompetent or we're not confident. But it's actually the opposite. The pauses create spaces. The pauses help to create authority in your speaking. They are actually good. So practice removing one filler. If you are a so person, like an person, consciously catch yourself and stop and then continue speaking. You will feel awkward, but your audience will not see you as being awkward. They will actually see you as the opposite. And then other things to consider: pace yourself. Sometimes I speak too fast. I grew up in New York. I worked in New York City for a long time. I adopted a lot of that fast communication. And sometimes that's hard to follow, but pace yourself. It's okay to slow down. Use the rhythm of your voice. Also use your hands. Hands help to show movement and body language and what you're saying. You are it. You are authentic. Modulate your voice. That's actually hard for me to do. You may find when I talk that I don't often modulate my voice. That's just something that has been hard for me to do since I was younger. And there are some physical limitations and this essential tremor thing that I got from my mom and my grandmother that sometimes contribute to that. And sometimes when I get conscious of that, I'll actually tell people about it as part of a story. And it'll help them see that I'm human. But modulate your voice, like modulation, using your hands, taking pauses. You can also adjust the dynamics of your voice, loudness and softness. You can bring people in and then excite people by changing the volume of your voice. Then making eye contact. Sometimes it's hard to do in these virtual mediums. You can look right at the camera, that helps. I'm not always the greatest at that, honestly, because sometimes I need to look off on the screen to see where I am at any given point. But the point here is these things might seem unnatural to you because they might feel unnatural to you, but they actually feel very natural to your audience. Some other strategies to take with your verbal communication that also demonstrate your cognitive ability to lead is recognizing what the person is saying by repeating back to them what they're saying. From what I understand, this is what you expressed. So not only repeating it back, you can interpret it and synthesize it. Facilitating the conversation, consciously leading the conversation either directly or through a consultative method. Directly, we're going to talk about this for the next 2 minutes. Consultative, what are your thoughts on pursuing this aspect of the project? Where this aspect of the project is the part of the project you want to move to. So using the question to get there. And synthesis of what happened in the conversation or what you've been saying, summarizing at the end, putting the main points together. If it's impromptu, this is a strong ability to have. It's to reflect back on everything that you said, bring it together in the most salient points and express that. And when you're speaking to a group, it's important to get the participation in the expression of the entire group. Are you actively going out to the members of the group and soliciting their communication? And are you listening? In verbal communication, it's just as much as saying something as it is listening, and sometimes even more so. How much can you listen so that when you do speak, it is really in service of the conversation, the business, and the others around you? And then this one is fun. It's also effective. So getting others to visualize, using words like imagine, what if. One example of this is one of the questions that I like to ask clients sometimes. And I'll say to them, imagine you just achieved the biggest success. You walk down to your boss's office, you give them a high five. What do you say to them? Just puts you in that context of becoming what you want to be, or helping somebody to realize something that they want to become or be, or they need to get done, and then getting them to be it, to live it, and express to you what it means to them. Okay, so today's action item is to think about today's mentorship session and understand how to apply some of these written and verbal communication recommendations to what you're doing and rehearsing them. Rehearse the filler thing. That is always amazing to do. It could blow your mind. Just rehearse them, practice it, create a habit. This alone can significantly change your leadership practice. This alone can significantly establish you as a transformational leader. So go do it. All right, we'll see you tomorrow for the last day of the program to wrap all this up. See you then.